It's Masters Week, so let's begin the show this way. Hello, friends. Welcome to Inside Coverage, the how, the why, any and everything you need to know about the National Football League. My name is Andrew Siciliano. Hope you had a fantastic holiday weekend or holiday week, Passover, Easter, friends and family, and Easter eggs and matzah and fun and frivolity, and springtime is here, except in Cleveland yesterday where I sat through a doubleheader. 42 degrees, real feel, 27 degrees, because why not? It's that time of the year. It is great to have everyone here listening and watching. It is great to have my dear friends back from a holiday break as well. It's Ben Fawkes on the right side of your screen if you're watching on yahoosports.tv or the YouTubes, as I've heard it called, because I was just at home sitting around a Seder table, or in the middle of the screen, the great Jori Epstein, who is questionable. Actually, no, we're going to drop the injury designation. She is not questionable. She's going to power through this show. Jori, how are you feeling?
I am doing well. My voice may come in and out during the show.
I love it.
But that's great. What we're here. Yeah. I mean, I go to owners meetings. I was kind of at the beginning. I started feeling my throat. And then over a week later, my body's like, oh, you thought that you could just go from place to place and go to owners meetings and not sleep. So you could be up late networking and then up early for the interviews. So I look forward to getting over it. But I'm excited to be here.
Listen, I tell people all the time, that we stay up late at these events for you, like the football fan. Like, we are burning the midnight oil. We are staying up at an open bar till 2 a.m. for you. Like, this is hard work. We're
selfless
doing
behavior.
It for you. And Jori was ordering water the entire time. That is the God's honest truth. We're sitting around a table, and it's like, round of beers, everybody. Jori's like, I'll have a water.
There you go.
Yeah. She's
occasionally a soda water with lime. We got really crazy.
Go crazy. But you know what I found out over the years? And Ben, tell me if you've done this. Is when you're out, when everyone else is maybe ordering another round, you can get the seltzer, the soda water, and then just put the piece of fruit, the lime, the lemon, and people are going to look at it and just assume that you have a mixed drink and you're drinking water, but you're fooling them.
People want the camaraderie, right? So no one's really looking at like, okay, what are you drinking? And listen, some of these late nights, combine and that, you're going to need to mix in some of those waters with some of the other drinks if you're going to make it, unless you're a select few, of which I am not, where you can just make it to like 4 a.m. and have 10 drinks. That's not how I'm built. So yeah, you're going to have to mix in some waters there if you want to make it to that late night, which is, as you say, where you get a lot of good nuggets and tidbits, some loose lips as well from coaches, coordinators, everyone else, couple drinks in them. They'll tell you how they really feel about that running back or left tackle or owner or somebody else.
I'm just all about the camaraderie here, to be honest with you. Number one. Number two, the combine is a lot different. The combine is a lot of like dry fits and light beers. But regardless, we'll move on from that. We then move on to a holiday weekend. I went to opening day Friday in Cleveland. Utterly fantastic. It's Chase the Lauder season, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. And then I did something yesterday that I don't know that I have ever done. And it's kind of why I did it, because they got rained out on Saturday. And I'm like, I'm going to stay on Sunday. I'm going to stay. I'm single. I could do this. So yesterday I went to a freezing cold doubleheader and then went across the street and saw the second half of the Cavaliers and the Pacers, a 6:00 Sunday night tip in your National Basketball Association as the Cavaliers try to hold on to the 4 seed in the Eastern Conference heading into the postseason with like 2 weeks to go. Guys, ever done 3 games in 2 different buildings in one day?
I don't know if I've done it pro. I think I've done it with high school games back in the day.
Which is real work. I wasn't working.
When you're one of 4, no, I'm talking for fun. When you're one of 4 kids and everyone's got games at the same time, you're going from guys here to girls there to middle school there to high school there. Yeah. So we had some pretty good ones back then, but I don't think I've done it with the pros. I might have one year. I think there was a time in college when I went to a UT football game and volleyball game the same day.
Yeah, so I've done a Northwestern football game and then like a Loyola basketball game when I was in Chicago. I once did a Wrigley game, like a Cubs day game, and a Sox night game. Hopped on the red line, went 8.1 miles south, straight shot, and then did both of those. But this is the first time, and like you've been to Cleveland, it's literally across the patio. You exit Progressive Field in left field. You take 25 steps. You are into the arena, and you're watching a basketball game. All right, no one cares about that. I hope you found the afikoman. Hope you found the Easter eggs. Hope you had a good time. Let's get to the football, because on Monday morning, as I'm flying back here to the home office in Southern California, and we have an aborted landing in 5 seconds before we're hitting the tarmac at LAX, woof, we take back off. Thank God we got back around and landed safely. We get the news that Dexter Lawrence wants a trade. The Giants defensive tackle, who was one of 2 first-round picks back in 2019 for Dave Gettleman. Daniel Jones went 6. Dexter Lawrence went 17 overall, has 2 years remaining on his deal. But that's kind of deceiving, because Dexter Lawrence, who is a 3-time Pro Bowler, he's been a second-team All-Pro twice. I once had a first-team All-Pro tell me there is no such thing as the second-team All-Pro. Anyone who says they're a second-team All-Pro is just making up stuff. But he has 2 years left on his deal, and he's scheduled to make $20 million this year. But Jori has no guaranteed money left. The only guaranteed money this year is $3.2 million of injury guarantee. So the Giants could cut him tomorrow, and they won't. He's an asset. The Giants could cut him tomorrow and get nothing in return. They have only $7 million in cap space, which is 27th overall. If you wanted to rank defensive tackles and what they're paid right now, Dexter Lawrence is currently 12th, behind, among the likes, Daron Payne, DeForest Buckner, Jeffrey Simmons, Quinnen Williams, Derek Brown, all good players, Aleem McNeil, Nnamdi Madubuike, Zach Allen, Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, and Chris Jones, 3 years after that deal, or 2.5 years after that deal was signed, is at 31.75. Giants are opening up the offseason program. Harbaugh wanted 10 new head coaches. They can do that tomorrow. Jori, what do you think of this?
I don't think Dexter Lawrence is going anywhere. I mean, I could be wrong. I didn't think Max Crosby was going anywhere until he was, and then he wasn't again. But when I look at this, I think, first of all, this is not a whole, he doesn't want to be here, he doesn't want to be here for the rebuild. It's he's not happy with the contract, the guaranteed money, as you said. And I think this is a player who John Harbaugh and the Giants are, they should be compelled to want to keep a guy like him, who is not only going to help elevate the play of those around him, but also in terms of cultural fit, he's been a cultural leader on that defense for a really long time, which if you are John Harbaugh head coach or you are Denard Wilson at defensive coordinator, you want that coming in. The other thing that complicates why I don't believe he is going to be traded is because he had a down year last year. And so both in regular statistics and advanced statistics, you want to talk about sacks? I mean, he went down from 9 sacks in 2024 to half a sack in 2025. He went down from 16 quarterback hits in 2024 to 8 in 2025. And even though I feel mixed about Pro Football Focus grades because they don't often know the assignments, I was shocked when I looked at the discrepancy between his grades for 3 years compared to last year. 2022, he was number 1 in run defense, number 1 in pass rush among interior defensive lineman grades. Then he was 3rd and 1st, 2nd and 8th. And then all of a sudden last year, he's their 56th ranked run defender and 7th ranked pass rusher. And if you look at ESPN's pass rush win rate and run stop win rates as well, it's the same thing. And so I just think when you look at this, pretty much every way you cut it up, they're going to be the Giants who say, we would want good return if we're trading a player of his caliber. And there are going to be other teams who say, yeah, but he fell off a cliff last year. Maybe it was the elbow. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the scheme. Maybe it was effort. I did hear from one person who I reached out to that they felt like the intensity of his play in 2025 looked very different than prior years of his career. And so when you put all of this together, the likelihood of what the Giants would value him at and what it's worth trading him at is very different than what other teams around the league, I think, are going to be willing to pay. So ultimately, my best guess would be, hey, maybe throw him a little more guaranteed money, move some of that $20 million into guarantees and call it a day. But I don't think missing an offseason workout in April should be something that anyone's too concerned about.
And it's a new regime, right, with John Harbaugh. So this to me is like, you're going from one parent asking to stay out past curfew to the other parent. Like it's a different, it's a new. Maybe that one didn't work. Andrew didn't like that one as much.
I'm putting it together. Yeah.
Yeah. But
I got you.
He's wanted a new contract, right, and wanted a better contract for a couple years. It hasn't happened. He's played out. He's a very good player, also very durable, right? I think outside of one season, he's played at least 16 games every year. So he's there for the Giants. And as well, he's also so important because he commands those double teams, right? The Giants defensive line has been so good with Thibodeau, Brian Burns. Hopefully they're getting more and more out of Abdul Carter. You need him in the middle as well, both as a pass rusher and a run defender to also take those double teams, allow those defensive ends to get those one-on-one matchups. And hopefully, that's how the Giants won that Super Bowl so many years ago, was that through that defensive line and that defense, they need a player like that. He was unstoppable a couple of years ago, especially in the playoffs against certain teams like my Vikings. He's been a great player for a long time. The question is, like we've said, is that a one-year aberration last year, or is that the start of a downfall and the Giants are saying, hey, this is something we're kind of getting ahead of. We don't want to give him any more money, but it just doesn't seem like they're going to get, like Jori's saying, fair return for that. I do think there are a lot of teams that would be interested if he got to the market, but it just seems like he's such an important piece for the Giants, and it seems like he wants to be there.
Listen, there's a lot going on last year. The Giants were 4-13. They blew out the staff. Shane Bowen was fired as well as defensive coordinator. There were rumblings during the season about Lawrence's fit scheme-wise there. Nothing worked. There's a reason John Harbaugh is there. I am willing to give him a pass, Lawrence, a pass on his performance a year ago. That said, I get his position as well. This is voluntary. He's got no guaranteed money left. The market has exploded at every position, particularly a defensive tackle. He is vastly underpaid, and this is his way of showing some leverage here, of executing some leverage and withholding his services. There's no on-field work right now. When you hear about these teams showing up, 10 of them, we'll do a deeper dive later in the week on all 10 and the challenges for each of these new head coaches. It is very, very clear. This is not required to be there. You are not required to be there. There is no on-field work at this first phase one of the offseason program. If you were to go right now to Yahoo's NFL page, we're spitballing some ideas of who could be a trade target. Ben, you mentioned the Vikings. Brian Flores always likes new shiny toys on defense, although traditionally defensive tackles in this scheme for Flores, they get after the quarterback overall, but defensive tackles do not eat that much. Bears have no cap space, but they could use a guy. How about putting him next to Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee? They had all this cap space. They had to spend money. They did. I don't know that that's the right move for the Titans. They probably have some other priorities here. You drop a Dexter Lawrence in, or you give up the trade capital required to get a Dexter Lawrence when you're more in a win-now proposition. The Chiefs, no. The Panthers, maybe. You put them alongside Derek Brown. The Bengals is an interesting one, because the Bengals could badly use him. But, Jori, the thing you got to remember here, I know you know this, I know, Ben, you know this, is that when you trade for a guy like Dexter Lawrence right now, you got to pay him, right? He's not going to Cincinnati and playing for 1 year, $20 million for Mike Brown. He would stay home, a la Trey Hendrickson, if need be.
Right. That's another thing that complicates any potential trade, is when people say, oh, well, what's it going to cost to trade him? Well, what are you doing with the salary? Because we see a lot of these guys who want to trade an extension. And so maybe a team is willing, let's say, to trade a first and a player for him. But are they also willing to pay him what he wants to get paid? And are they willing to do it now? And I don't think the Bengals would be in that category. I think two things worth noting is, one, when I reach out to people around the league and they think about Dexter Lawrence's value with the Giants, they're kind of like, he could be that Justin Madubuike for Denard Wilson and John Harbaugh's system. And so I think that that is a value. Now, I'm also curious, given how much of the Ravens personnel is left, and given we know that they kind of swung, they didn't get Max Crosby. I recognize one's an edge rusher and one's an interior defensive lineman, but if we're supposed to believe and take them at their word that they really were willing to put multiple pieces on the defensive line, I think that's interesting to consider. I also think that in terms of what is fair, so to say, for Dexter Lawrence to be asking for, not fair, but what is a compelling argument to a team, I'm not super compelled by the argument that, 10 guys are making more than him now, because that's just the nature of when you get your deal done. And if you do a deal, I think that your average annual value is going to be less than people who come after you if they're performing and you're coming off a bad year. So I'll forgetting what he's worth, but I don't think that's the most compelling case. The more compelling case to me is whether he gets the guarantees. So I don't think it's what his contract max value should be. I think it's what his guarantees should be. And as we noted, they're not guaranteed right now. And so moving the money already on the contract to guarantees, I think is probably something that's, one, more compelling to the Giants, and two, something that's probably a more compelling argument for Dexter Lawrence. And guarantees matter. So that's what I would be arguing if I were him.
I went immediately to the Ravens. That was where I thought. Now, again, kind of doing a little research, not knowing the potential compensation, I saw Jordan Renan's tweet that maybe it was a late one, maybe a 2, maybe, a 2 in a mid round or something else. So the Ravens, certainly interesting. They have those picks. I also looked, again, not sure, cap space, everything else. The Texans have 2 2s. Maybe that's another team. Again, you add strength on strength. And you never know as well how much teams are looking for that compensation versus the necessity of a good player as well and wanting to trade him out of the conference too. So you don't necessarily have to say he's not going to go anywhere in the NFC, but all things being equal, you'd obviously would like to trade him to the AFC, theoretically, again, taking away the division, some other teams in the NFC. So those were a couple. The Jaguars have a couple extra thirds as well. But some of he could be a fit on most teams, but the Ravens is the one, especially, I don't know, maybe I missed it. I don't know that have we gotten a health update on Madubuike? Like, it seems like it's a neck, and John Harbaugh didn't want to say anything, and he didn't play the rest of the season. He obviously is an all-pro talent there. We don't even know if he's going to be playing football next season.
We don't. There are some that are more hopeful now than they were 6 months ago. But again, it does remain to be seen. Yeah, it'd be a great fit for the Ravens. I should note of the Texans today, they had MJ Emerson, veteran corner, a former Brown top 100 pick who a couple of years ago was on a Pro Bowl arc and was looking at his second contract, who tore his Achilles last year in training camp. Andrew Berry intimated at the league meeting, the annual meeting, that he'd like Emerson back, but Emerson probably wants to be a starter, get paid like a starter right now. He wouldn't be a starter with the Browns behind Denzel Ward and Tyson Campbell. So that would be a good... I love the guy. I wish the Browns brought him back. That would be a nice piece there for Nick Caserio later in free agency. Let's get to Lamar Jackson, because of those 10 new head coaches, it was Jesse Minter today, Monday, as we record this show to start the week, that was the first to have his team in for the offseason program. The other 9 will have their teams in, as allowed by the CBA as a new head coach, later this week. And it is notable that Lamar Jackson was there. The Ravens posted a video of Lamar Jackson. There he is. Slow-mo, the slowest Lamar has ever been, walking in to the building in Owings Mills, Maryland. Notice how the Ravens do have cameras there to film a player arrival when it is Lamar Jackson. Interesting. Anyway. Look, the Ravens were 6-7. The coach got fired. They didn't make the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. But Lamar does not show up for voluntary workouts. It's not a hard and fast rule. Generally speaking, he is not there. Declan Doyle is the new OC, Jori. He's 29. Former Bear assistant, former Lion assistant, well-traveled. Declan Doyle, or Broncos, beg your pardon, made the point when he got hired 2 months ago that he really wants Lamar there. He kind of towed the line, got right up on that line of saying, my player's got to be here, because, again, the CBA says you don't have to be there. I heard Eric Mangini say something earlier today, totally contrarian opinion. He said, hey, it's great that he's there, but what does it say about his commitment the previous 7 years? And I was like, I think that's a stretch. The guy's won a lot of games and 2 MVPs. I'm not going to question his effort or focus the previous portion of his career, but it is definitely news that he's there today.
Yeah, I think there's one element, which is we don't know all of the details because there's always times where, oh, so-and-so's missing practice and it turns out they're at a funeral or they're at their parents' birthday party or something like that. But I do think from a more macro level, given how many offseason activities Lamar Jackson did not attend, as we know, they're voluntary officially, I don't think it's was he committed to the team. I think it's, one, did he think that he needed them or would value/benefit from them? And two, did he want to kind of do that for John Harbaugh, Todd Monken, or whoever was the play caller/leader at that time, which we know he's had tension with the coaching staff that's been widely reported. And so I think that starting off on a different foot with new coaching staff with whom he doesn't yet have tension is extremely notable. I also think that there's a new offense. There's going to be a new offense, a new play caller. Some of the weapons he's going to be working with are different because the Ravens lost so many guys in free agency. And so I think when you put all those pieces together, I don't know that showing up to April when you can't even get on the field is going to make a drastic difference in terms of the chemistry with your teammates, but I do think it sends a message about your buy-in to the coaching staff. And I actually like that Declan Doyle was saying he wants him in off-season activities. Now, granted, I'm a little biased here because, as y'all know, I wrote a big feature on Declan when he was with the Bears. Talked to a bunch of people in his life and really went back into how he coaches and why Ben Johnson was picking this 28-year-old at the time who he'd never worked with to come be his offensive coordinator. But I think that there's kind of this element of, and we're going to talk about this more in the next segment, how much should coaches and leaders not put pressure on quarterbacks, but sort of hold them to a certain standard. I mean, Tom Brady always talks about Bill Belichick holding him to the same standard, if not a higher standard than everyone around him. And he didn't like it at the time. And especially as he won the Super Bowls, he didn't like it. But I think there is an element of, if you're trying to have a culture of accountability, if you're trying to have a culture of merit-based work and making sure everyone earns it, then holding the quarterback to the same standard, I think, is understandable. And I think that some of the root of the last regime's challenges with Lamar Jackson kind of became this, Lamar's like, I'm a two-time MVP. Why do I have to follow the standards for people who aren't MVPs? And the coaching staff's like, yeah, but we need the whole culture being like this. And so whatever reason it was in the past, I do think that it is a notable step that he showed up. And I don't think it was just that it was convenient for his schedule.
Yeah, first, I think it's funny that, in the NFL, we're celebrating like touchdowns and big hits. It's clearly like April when, a guy is slowly walking, and this is like a celebrated, video. Look at that. Yeah. It's a different time of year. It's all good. We love the NFL. I think for the Ravens, though, this is more in spirit, right? And I think, as Jori touched on, kind of that team camaraderie, there's probably not going to be a lot going on the field between Lamar Jackson and his teammates, but they also haven't won a Super Bowl under Lamar Jackson, right? And so you could say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Why not try this and see with a new coaching staff? Come in, you have more time around your teammates on the field, off the field. Maybe this helps. I think it's also interesting, the Ravens with their offseason, right? They showed, in a sense, they are all in, right? They had the Max Crosby trade, which then did get rescinded, but they showed Lamar Jackson like, hey, this is what we're willing to do. We're willing to trade 2 first-round picks, something we have never done before, to go and get this player. Obviously, as we just talked about, maybe Dexter Lawrence, or there's someone else that's out there, obviously seeing what they do in the draft as well. But they've kind of shown, I think Lamar Jackson probably feels like, hey, every year in the AFC is very difficult. They haven't gotten to where they've wanted to go for a variety of different reasons. This is a big year for him and for that team. And obviously it's a new coaching staff too. So there isn't any more, I know some Ravens fans here at Yahoo, right? Not necessarily the biggest John Harbaugh fans in the postseason and coaching, like, that excuse is out the window. Now it's a new coaching staff. Lamar Jackson, is the captain of the ship. Like, it's time to go, get everyone on board. So I think it's interesting that he showed up. I think it can only be a good thing. And obviously he still has that contract that's out there as well. And so saying, hey, I'm on board, I'm willing to do this, even though I might not necessarily want to, it's kind of a show of good faith, almost in the same way the Ravens said, hey, in that offseason, like, we're going all in. We understand how important this season is.
Yeah, and Steve Bisciotti, the owner, when you go back to his press conference after the firing of John Harbaugh, and he made some comments about Lamar showing up and being there in the coaching search. If he wanted to be there, and said he wanted the deal done, Lamar's new contract done before free agency. Granted, that did not happen. Lamar wants the new contract. I assume he'll get that new contract, and today was a good step. Honestly, I think it's more. This is great. So he was there today, but call me in November, and when they ask him to run 12 RPOs, and he says I'm throwing it every time, and I'm not going to run it, then we'll see how the spirit of cooperation is. Just thinking out loud on that one. Speaking of quarterbacks. Coming up, what did we think of that Jeremy Fowler piece last week about one Jalen Hurts? That's next on Inside Coverage. It's Inside Coverage on Yahoo. Andrew Siciliano, Jori, Epstein, who is under the weather and playing through it, battling even in the offseason, showing up for work, much like Lamar Jackson and Ben Fawkes as well. So Jeremy Fowler last week, as we exited the annual meeting in Arizona and went to our respective corners, Jeremy, really tall guy who works for ESPN. If you've ever met Jeremy, the three of us collectively, probably on each other's shoulders, do not equal one Jeremy Fowler, sashaying through a lobby, wrote a piece on ESPN.com, and I give him credit. He got what a lot of people have been whispering for a long, long time about Jalen Hurts, and he got quotes about it. Long piece, and there's the tweet. Jalen Hurts stands at a crossroads despite his immense success. Sources say he has a hand in the Eagles' offense becoming calcified, and frustrations have grown with Tim McManus on the co-byline there, and this kind of fed the beast of the talking or screaming heads the next couple of days on ESPN. There's this conspiracy theory that, this drops right at the end of the meeting, and ESPN and NFL Network merged officially on April 1st, and this is people. Guys, this stuff had been out there. I tip the cap to Jeremy for working the annual meeting hard and getting some quotes. I don't know who the quotes came from, but there were multiple people at that meeting that have called plays for Jalen Hurts over the years. Who knows? Regardless, those guys got the story, and some of it is interesting. I'm going to read here some of these quotes from the story. Poor body language, not always bought in, not the most coachable, and the players notice, a team source says. Also from the article, a source close to Hurts said the quarterback needs coaches who will, quote, check him, opining that Hurts had too many yes people around him this past season. A source close to the quarterback stresses that Hurts understands motions and shifts, help the quarterback, and doesn't dissuade coaches from using them, because that was one of the accusations. Points out that he threw a lot of picks against zone this year. Sure. That he's been rigid. That he doesn't like to play under center. That he and A.J. Brown have had a falling out. They're no longer best friends. Or they're still best friends, but they don't get along anymore. The multiple Eagles players are frustrated. There were quotes in there, and the quotes carry the story. What also, Jori, needs to be noted, and when we unpacked a lot of this in December, pointed out that he has 2 years and $103 guaranteed million on his contract. So where are the Eagles and their quarterback right now?
Yeah, this whole story is interesting because when you look at what everyone's saying, whether it's about how he leads his team or whether he changes play calls or if he's receptive to what the coaches are saying, I think all of these are elements that if you're winning and if you're making progress, then everyone's fine with it. And they say this is what you do. And Aaron Rodgers changed all sorts of play calls at the line of scrimmage, but he won 4 MVPs. And all of these questions become even larger, as we talked about with Lamar Jackson, when a player, and particularly a quarterback, has a lot of success. So you're talking about a Super Bowl MVP. You're talking about someone who a few years ago was in this conversation as one of the greatest quarterbacks in the league at that year. And I also think that this is someone who has had change at play caller and offensive coordinator every year since basically he was in high school for the most part. I did a story, when I first got to Yahoo several years ago, about how he'd had 7 play callers in 8 years, and every year since he's had a different play caller. So there is an element of you're asking him to adapt every single year, but I do think some of this comes down to if you don't want Jalen Hurts to be able to change calls at the line of scrimmage, you as coaching staff need to tell him that more. If you don't like that Jalen Hurts is not going under center, you need to have some accountability for all of this. And I'm not saying whether or not those are the right things. I think that the Eagles offense had a lot more wrong with it last year than Jalen Hurts, and he was probably the cause of some of it and the symptoms of the rest, or of other parts. But I do think that if you're Nick Sirianni, you're not calling plays, and you're a walk-around head coach whose number one job is to instill the culture, the messaging, the communication between everyone, and that's what we kept hearing the year that they won the Super Bowl, then that's also your job in the other years, is how do you fix some of this? So it is interesting. I still think that, I know that Andrew, you had said a couple months ago on this show that you thought he could be traded this offseason.
I don't think so anymore. Yeah.
I still think that it's my belief that the Eagles organization kind of used this year as a, based off what happens this year, is he your guy for the next 3 to 5 years, or do you try and make a deal next offseason? But I think part of the story is probably people saying, hey, Jalen, we do want to let you know that we see these things. We can't have star receivers like A.J. Brown not wanting to work with our quarterback. And also, you have a new offensive coordinator coming in, and he's a lot less experienced than some of your previous guys. But it's pretty normal around the league to have these guys come in and want them to run more under center and play action because of what they believe it does for the run game. I mean, Jaden Daniels is going to have the same idea over in Washington this year. I talked to head coach Dan Quinn last week and at the owners meetings, and he was kind of like, look, we want Jaden to use his mobility, but we want him to use it to extend plays in the pocket as opposed to take off and run. And so there's kind of these questions of what's best for the player, what's best for the team. And ultimately, Saquon Barkley also didn't have the best year last year. And so I think that the offense was probably built in part on a expectation, if not hope, that Saquon would look in 2025 like he looked in 2024, and he didn't. And the offensive line is kind of this underrated, not secret, but underrated massive issue for the Eagles, and quarterback play looks massively different depending on what an offensive line does. And so that to me is where the swing of this is. Yes, the quarterback looks different, but a lot of this is really, it's the pieces around him, and he's partly responsible for all of that, and he also has to adapt based off that.
Yeah, the Eagles are just like, usually they say winning cures all ills. The Eagles, I guess, are the exception to that. Like, I'll just quote what I said a couple of weeks ago. They've gone 50-18 the last 4 seasons, and they've won the NFC East 3 times. Obviously, won the Super Bowl. Like, people should be somewhat happy, and they just seem to always be at each other's throats. Also, Jori's mentioned the offensive line.
It's Philadelphia. I mean,
of course, but you won a Super Bowl. You've been making the playoffs. It's not like they're an embarrassment. I told you guys,
there's someone who works from the Eagles who always tells me they want to make shirts, Philadelphia, where winning is never enough.
It is, and that's also in the article. Like, deep in that article, Jeremy points out that, there was that frustration, certainly, a year ago. And does too much of it fall on the quarterback? Yeah. Usually, that's how this business goes. But nobody, Ben, sorry I cut you off, nobody can look at the Eagles' offense last year and thought it worked, because it didn't.
Yeah, and I was going to say to Jori's point as well, like offensive line, now Jeff Stoutland's not there anymore, right? Kind of the secret weapon or not so secret weapon for the Eagles. And ultimately, I think for Jalen Hurts, it comes down to, can he not do these other things, right? Being under center, turning his back to the defense, and that's why he doesn't want to do them? Or he just has preferred and hasn't had to do them because the offense has been successful in this kind of basic mold that they've been able, obviously, to make the playoffs, win the NFC East, win the Super Bowl. So he might be saying in those internal meetings, like, listen, what I'm doing is good enough. I don't need to change. I don't want to change. But then when it looks like it did this season, and even when they were winning, it didn't look good. There is no way they should have lost that playoff game against that 49ers roster in Philadelphia. Like, that is an embarrassing loss in the playoffs. Clearly something has to change. I don't think we were shocked by anything that was in this article. I did think it was interesting as well, and you guys would have a better sense than I would of how many people were kind of willing to speak ill, about the quarterback, right? And obviously there's a lot of offensive coordinators in that, but I think it was 12 sources or so in and around the Eagles. Like, there are a lot of people who are jumping at the opportunity to say, take some shots at Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I'm not suggesting that Kellen Moore nor Shane Steichen was somehow a source. I'm not trying to suggest that. What I'm suggesting is that there was this. There were in some corners. I'll say Mike Florio. I'm not calling Mike out, but he had suggested. I don't agree with it. That interesting timing with the story. You're coming from the annual meeting in which the entire world is there. So to source a big story at the annual meeting to me is not in any way fishy.
Also, you couldn't have put out a big story like this if you hadn't done significant reporting beforehand. You were probably tying up loose ends at the meeting, not starting it there.
Absolutely. So, yeah, to me, there was no big deal there. But along those lines, Mike does the show with Chris Sims and tip of the cap to Chris, because Chris was the one last December. He wasn't the only voice, but he was one of the loudest voices pounding the table last December going, guys, it's Jalen Hurts' fault. Now, that's his opinion. He's a former NFL quarterback. But he said everyone in Philadelphia knows it. A.J. Brown is frustrated because he's basically the spokesman for the offense. He looks like the bad guy, but he is the frustration spokesman for the rest of the offense. What will be fascinating in my eyes is that you have a first-time play caller, Sean Mannion, who is a heck of a college quarterback. When he left Oregon State, he was the most prolific passer in Pac-12 history. The best, like number one. Playing for Mike Riley up at Oregon State, heck of a quarterback, never really had much of an NFL career other than, starting week 18 annually for the Rams when they had already made the playoffs. But Sean Mannion, first-time play caller, came from Green Bay, and now you're going, Jalen, you're listening to this guy. And people like Sean Mannion. I'm kind of mildly excited to see where this goes. If it doesn't go well, once again, Jori, to your point, it's another play caller, and you're saying that the final chair, the final decision maker, or the final test is with a first-time play caller. That is an interesting dynamic with 2 years and $103 million with an M dollars left on that contract. Well, it's all. Go ahead.
And Andrew, you say if it doesn't go well, there's a new play caller, but there's also the possibility that if it does go well, there's a new play caller because Kellen Moore got the head job in New Orleans. Shane Steichen got the job with the Colts for head coach. And so it's funny because on one hand, people talk about you don't need a play caller to be your head coach. You need the best leader. You need the best manager. You need the best hirer of other coaches. But the Eagles are an example of how challenging it is if on either side of the ball, and particularly on offense, you don't have your head coach be your play caller. And I would say they're even a little bit lucky / intentional that they got Vic Fangio at that defensive coordinator position. He's later in his career. He's not necessarily going to be raring for another head coaching opportunity the way that some up and coming coordinators are. But I mean, there's going to be this turnover as long as you don't have your play caller at head coach the way that Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and other coaches are.
Before I ask you this question, Jori, welfare check. How you doing? How's
we're hanging in there, in there.
Can we get you tea? Can we anything? No.
No, I think we're gonna make it.
Okay. So then I'm gonna ask this because I stumbled upon a Cleveland sports radio thing in my IG feed. The algorithm, by the way, these algorithms are undefeated. Sound like an old man here. But every single morning when I wake up, and I'm on the West Coast, so when I'm here and not in Cleveland, every single morning, 6 a.m., the first thing I get is from the two sports radio stations in Cleveland, whatever they're talking about that morning. Like the algorithm knows that's what I'm clicking. Like it just goes right into my feed. Last week, one of the two stations was having a conversation about trading for Jalen Hurts. This is in light of this Jeremy Fowler article. And they were debating, like, what would you give up for him? Jori, what do you think the trade market would be? Let's play make-believe. Let's play make-believe. The contract is now tradable. Roll with this. How many teams do you think would want him? I'm not suggesting that he's some pariah, that no one wants him in their building. Quite the opposite. He's a very likable guy. But how many teams do you think would rush to acquire him?
Yeah, it's a great question, Andrew. And first of all, I know we're taking the contract here, but I do want to note that because of how the Eagles structure their contracts and because of how much money they push down the road in terms of it counting on the cap, according to Over the Cap, if they were to trade Jalen Hurts pre-June 1st this year, they would have $65.7 million in dead cap. So I just want to note that.
Yeah, no, we know.
I just want to note that.
Totally, and it's great that you do know that, because that's like what you reported a couple of weeks ago about A.J. Brown as well. These would have to be post-June 1 moves. I still do firmly believe A.J. Brown is getting traded post-June 1. Jalen Hurts ain't getting traded, okay? Right. This is all make-believe. Go.
Right. But in terms of, I mean, I would say, I don't think there's not 15 quarterbacks in the league better than him. And I would say he's probably around top 10. And so if you are 15 to 20 teams, you should be considering him. And then there's the question of what are you giving up? And if you have a quarterback on a rookie contract who's playing well enough, what does that mean? So I would say if I had to guess, there were probably 10 teams. I'm just spitballing here without having like done my research and asking sources. I would think there would be 10 teams somewhat interested and maybe 5 of them like actually willing to start making calls and putting together deals, and then 2 or 3. Because I mean, again, what's interesting though about these dual threat quarterbacks, and I hate to boil it down to this, is we saw Lamar Jackson available. He's a 2-time MVP, and maybe he was a 1-time MVP at the time when he was in theory available if you were willing to give up enough. And it was pretty shocking how few teams actually pounced, even though I understand there was a cost. And so that's why when I say how many teams would be available, it's not because he's better than all of their quarterbacks. It's because it does require a certain level of play. And if you don't feel like he's got the full complement of opportunities or options in the passing game, well, how do you feel about that? A lot of teams, like I remember talking to a general manager around the Lamar time, and I couldn't believe that the team who at the time needed a quarterback was not going after Lamar. And they're like, yeah, but you know, we would really have to change our whole offense for Lamar to be able to accentuate what he does best. And so I would imagine you'd get some of that conversation when it comes to Jalen Hurts, whether or not it's fair if you start asking teams.
And he hasn't shown it, right? That's what the article has said. It's not like, oh, he did all of these different things and play action under center, and this year went really well or went really poorly. He just hasn't really tried it for a long period of time. And so I think that also hurts the case or hurts that potential trade market, to your point, Jori, because much like Lamar, you're going to have to switch your offense around. This isn't a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes, so it's plug and play. He can go in any offense. He'll be just fine. You're going to have to switch some things around. I'll also be curious to see kind of the level of accountability. I think it was mentioned in Jeremy's article. I want to say they were facing the Packers and they were winning at the end of the game, and it was like a 3rd or 4th down, and he just checked to like a go ball to A.J. Brown. I think it was incomplete. The Packers got the ball back, didn't win the game, but like those are the types of things that when they work, they're great. When they don't work, that's when some of those things happen. I don't think Nick Sirianni called him out for that. If I recall, Andrew, I might be misremembering, but that was one of the things where like there was a play call. Jalen Hurts saw something different. He went on his own with A.J. Brown. It didn't work out. And then the head coach and everyone else has to kind of cover and be like, no, that wasn't a big deal. You know, again, when it works, it's great. When it doesn't, it's frustrating.
Yeah, I've seen it work in person. 2 years ago, Eagles coming off the bye. Nick Sirianni's under fire. This is the 2024 season. That was when Sirianni and Hurts are having a meeting during the bye week. Are they meeting? Did they meet? What was discussed? There was no meeting. So that was the game where Sirianni, after they won, they beat the Browns. Browns should have won, but we'll add that one to the list. Sirianni is screaming at fans, walking to the tunnel. They won that game. Browns are about to get him off the field. Well, the Eagles are about to punt. Browns are about to get him off the field. And Jalen Hurts checked to a goal ball down the left sideline. Greg Newsome is right there. I believe it was A.J. Brown, and he dropped it in the bucket. And they got the first down, took a knee, game over. So I've seen him do that against a good defense and make it work. This article that Fowler wrote starts with the end of the game, the Niners game of the postseason, where they called 4 verts, or Jalen checked to 4 verts, whatever it was. It was 4 verts against quarters. And, every one of your uncles says it ain't going to work, but Jalen loved 4 verts. Moving on. Big season is your headline for Jalen Hurts, but we knew that because it is always sunny in the place that he plays football. Coming up next, Kirk Cousins to Vegas? Really? What does it mean for Fernando Mendoza? And Kyle Shanahan says he's not ready for TV. Who would we like to see on TV? That is next. Inside Coverage on Yahoo. At the annual meeting last week, Sean McVay and Matt LaFleur. I'm sorry, LaFleur. It's not LaFleur, it's LaFleur. Both said, hey, Kirk Cousins, what are you doing? Come on over. Instead, he's going to Vegas. He is going to a team that he knows is taking a quarterback in the first round. Unlike his situation a couple of years ago in Atlanta, he knows that they are taking Fernando Mendoza at number 1 overall. On the surface, don't believe the numbers. It's a 1-year or 2-year, $20 million deal. In essence, the Falcons are stuck paying part of the bill. Well done, Raiders. You buying something on credit there, make somebody else pay that bill. I do think it is interesting, however, from the Cousins perspective, other than the fact that he'll be a great mentor. I do think he will be a good mentor here. I do think it gives the Raiders a little bit of some ramp to get Mendoza ready. But I've heard Jori people say, oh, look at the contract. This means Mendoza sitting and Cousins is your starter. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And I do think Kirk is risking something here. Because if he went to LA and sat behind Stafford, he's not playing. If he went to Green Bay and sat behind Love, he's not playing unless one of those guys gets injured. This, to me, is one of those classic situations where the Raiders will say, Cousins is going to be our guy. And then Mendoza lights it up in August. And we've seen this movie so many times before. Rookie quarterback, we're going to wait, we're going to wait, we're going to wait, we're going to wait. Man, it is so tempting. Oh, my gosh. It's like when you get off the plane in Vegas and, woo, you're having fun. Like, it's going to be so tempting to play Mendoza week 1. And I just fear those September cutaways during games. There's Kirk Cousins sat on the sideline. He chose the Raiders because it was his only chance to play at all. But in the end, it's really not much of a chance. What do you think?
Yeah, I think your points are great, Andrew, because when I was talking to people about this over the last few weeks before he signed, there was this idea of, oh, well, Kirk will wait on Pittsburgh to see if Aaron Rodgers is going there because that would be his best chance to start otherwise if they decided to sign him. And there was kind of this conversation of it wasn't that Kirk had no options. He had to decide what he most cared about of how much money he made. Was he playing for a contender, or if he wanted to actually get playing time and ideally for him starting time. And so I think clearly he picked the starting time and maybe some degree of the money over the contender. But I do think that as much as we can say, oh, he's going to be Fernando's mentor, he's not going there to be a mentor. I'm not saying he won't help the guy out a little bit, and I'm not saying that there's not a lot you can learn from Kirk Cousins. I think there's a ton you can learn from Kirk Cousins, but whether it's Ryan Tannehill in recent years, whether it's Joe Flacco in recent years, these veteran quarterbacks' primary goal is not to mentor a guy. They want to play, and that's why they're still doing this. They're not leaving their families and devoting all these hours to keeping their body right for the primary purpose of mentoring. So even if there is probably some degree of realism for Kirk Cousins that they're ultimately just using him as a bridge, if that, to get to Fernando Mendoza, I don't think that's what he's going for. From Fernando Mendoza's side, I really like this because I think that this takes the pressure off him to be ready immediately. We've seen a lot of quarterbacks who were put out there too soon. I do think that with Tyler Linderbaum at center, I feel better about Mendoza starting in the first half of the season than I would have otherwise. And I've also been wrong before in the sense of Drake May and the Patriots. I thought they should not put that guy out there anywhere near as early as they did because of how bad the offensive line was. And then it turned out he was a little more ready and got good reps, despite the fact that they weren't winning games. But I just view this as kind of like okay, you have a team where you have options here. And I agree with you, Andrew, that if Mendoza lights it up in preseason and they feel great, they'll probably put him out there week 1. But I don't know. I think it kind of could go both ways. This is also not someone in Mendoza who's got like 5 years of great college starting. I don't know. I think there's kind of an element of he really came on the scene primarily in his last year, which means you might want to see it a little longer.
First of all, we have to see some buddy cop, Kirk Cousins, Fernando Mendoza on the strip content.
Please,
like that is just prime Raiders.
Too.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So it would be amazing. to Jori's point as well, Tyler Linderbaum, big, right? Both for a rookie quarterback and for a veteran, because now whether or not the rest of the offensive line certainly have some pieces and holes to fill in, but the Raiders have had a good free agency. They obviously have Max Crosby back. It is a better team overall, and ultimately for a rookie quarterback too. It's a tough AFC West. You got the Broncos. By DVOA, the Broncos were the 5th best defense, Chargers 10th, Chiefs 16th. So you have 3 of the, top half defenses in the NFL there. It's a difficult place to come into as a rookie. I do think they'll be improved from where they were, but this kind of gives them an option, especially, hey, if Mendoza's great, you want to start him week 1, or hey, he's great and you want him to start him week 1, but that schedule the first 3 or 4 weeks looks pretty rough. Let's let Kirk go out there, see if he can play, let Fernando Mendoza sit behind him for a little bit, and then get him out in a certain game, maybe where he has a little better chance of success, as opposed to, let's say, they open, at Denver or some very difficult place to play.
I mean, the AFC West is not going to be easy regardless. Where else could he start? Could he go to Arizona? Any LaFleur will do. Maybe, sure. But then you just run the risk of Ty Simpson getting drafted there. There really aren't any starting jobs still open. It wasn't going to go to Cleveland. There's Pittsburgh, as Jori pointed out, but I think most people believe it's going to be Aaron Rodgers. There could always be the April surprise, and Aaron says, see ya. But I don't think that's going to happen, and he ain't going to the Jets, right? They made their move for Geno Smith. So where are you going to go? Like I said, the Rams and the Packers, you're not going to play. You're the emergency to get through a couple of games if there's an injury to either one of those 2 quarterbacks. The Raiders are the only place, other than the Cardinals, to play, truly play. But Vegas analogy, you are rolling the dice that they're not going to fall in love with the number 1 overall pick and just say, play the kid. Remember having a conversation with David, not Derek, David Carr a year ago. And for those who don't remember, David Carr was the number 1 overall pick of the expansion Texans. He got the snot beaten out of him behind a horrible expansion offensive line, and he still holds the record for most sacks in a season. As a rookie, took a beating. And he was last year in Cleveland. We're talking about Shedeur or Dylan Gabriel. And I said, are you team sit or start for the rookie quarterbacks? Whether you're number 1 overall as he was, or number 144 as Shedeur was, or 94 as Gabriel was. And he said, sit, absolutely sit. Like Mahomes, sit out the entire year other than the final game of the year. But it's so tempting, and the Raiders are going to be so tempted. And I get what Cousins did. He's getting well compensated. It's not like some $200 million deal, as the funny money that was reported, but he's rolling the dice a little bit in my eyes. Kyle Shanahan,
Andrew,
go ahead.
Go ahead. I just want to note that it's worth noting that when Kirk Cousins took the contract with Atlanta, a big factor for him was he wanted multi-year security, because he and his agent Mike McCartney believed that if you just have 1 year of good money, even if it's good money, they're more likely to move on to the next guy. And I do think this structure of this contract, both in terms of the $20 million over 1/2 years with the Falcons paying it, as well as the potential upside, even if he's unlikely to hit it, kind of reflect that they at least need him for this season, and they're not going to go to another backup immediately, basically, is what this contract is saying. And I do think that multi-year security is something that Kirk valued, or particularly in Atlanta, and also to some degree now. And the challenge is that Atlanta showed us, even when you have that security and it logically looks like you have that security, sometimes they still go and draft someone else. So, I mean, I think Kirk should be going in with his eyes wide open about his playing time, because he saw it when he was getting $100 million over 3 years, and they still went and drafted Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall. Yeah, and I think Kirk Cousins had his eye on Vegas last year before they made their Geno Smith move. Anyway, getting on to Kyle Shanahan here, who did say at the league meeting, the owners' meetings, the annual meeting, call it what you may, that he is not ready to jump to TV, despite doing a pretty good job for NBC there in the postseason, notably the Super Bowl with that fantastic pinstripe suit that he had on. He said that his family is not ready to have him at home every day and working TV on weekends. He's going to keep on coaching. But it did lead me to ask, or to think, other than the obvious McVay, right? You're not allowed to say McVay.
Who do we think would make, of the current NFL head coaches, the best TV analyst, studio or game? Ben, you go first.
So I think there are a lot of good options. You, to me at least, I think you want a former player and somebody who is very honest, sometimes brutally honest, and isn't necessarily interested in getting back to coaching, right? So once he decides he's out. Now he's on TV. That's what he's doing. So I think sometimes when you have coaches who retire, they don't want to always be, or at least take a year off, right? They don't want to be completely honest because they don't know if they're getting back in the league. They don't want to piss off a certain team, certain players, free agents, trades, all that. So a long way of saying, I think Mike Vrabel would be great. We've kind of seen only in his press conferences the kind of how different it is from the Bill Belichick era. He seems like he keeps it, pretty open and honest, and he's had to deal with, everything that the typical coach has had to deal with, and you just feel like you get a lot more information out of him. Now, he's not going to give away everything as a coach, but I do feel like there's more on the bone there, that if he wasn't restricted, and obviously there's injuries you don't want to give out, things like that, I just think he would be great on TV. So he was one that immediately sprung to mind for me.
Yeah, I love that answer. I think Mike Vrabel would teach us a lot and also be very entertaining, as he is wont to be. I think that for me, it's Sean Payton. I recognize he has kind of dabbled in this already, but when I think about what makes a great broadcaster, I think about someone who knows the game schematically well and can diagnose quickly what's going on in the field, who has a sense of the historical perspective and the context of what's going on, and then has that honesty/entertainment element. And I mean, you want to talk about someone who doesn't care about the consequences of what they say. Sean Payton wasn't just like that on TV. He's also like that as a coach. And so, I mean, even I was talking to him for a story last week about a specific team and their defense now. And he's like, oh, well, when that team made this similar move 20 years ago, here's what happened. And here's who you should talk to. And I was just amazed watching the way his mind went from A to B to C and his willingness to share it all. So if I took that conversation and put it on TV, I think it would make for great TV.
He is entertaining. When Sean did a year, when he took his year off and he was working for Fawkes in the studio here in Los Angeles, did a great job on Fox NFL Sunday. I would, on more than one occasion, run into Sean. He wasn't living too far from where I sit now. Would run into him out and about, out working out walking the dog, whatever. And he is not afraid to tell you how he feels about anything. Hey, what do you think of that game yesterday between Team A and Team B? Go. Be sure to take your AirPods out, put them in the little case, put them in your pocket. You're going to be there. You're going to be there a while. All right. My answer is Nick Sirianni, and I know, I think that answer may surprise you, but here's why. Because there are a lot of people, he gets under a lot of people's skin. Philly fans love to hate him because they're Philly fans, and I get it. He can be irritating to some, and I think he would tick people off on television. I don't know if he's going to be like no holds barred, totally unfiltered, calling people out left and right. But the Nick Sirianni that I described earlier, that walks to the tunnel and points a finger up at fans that are heckling him, I think might be the Nick Sirianni on television. I think he'd be great, whether it's in the studio, that's the obvious one, or calling a game. I mean, wouldn't you love to hear Nick Sirianni go, what are they doing when there's a play call, on a play call or a replay decision or anything? I don't know how comfortable he would feel being that guy publicly all the time, but I do think when he gets riled up, because we've seen it, he's awesome. Will you get him riled up all the time? Is that sustainable as a broadcaster? I don't know. Might be fun though.
Just tell him Jalen Hurts was solely responsible for their Super Bowl success, and then let him go.
I mean, it might have to be an alternate feed kind of feel to it. Sorry.
It is funny. The more I think about this, the more I also think that Dan Campbell would be great for two reasons. Yeah. One, obviously the entertainment element, the biting kneecaps, but also my current favorite color analyst in the game is Greg Olsen. And I think that while Greg Olsen is uniquely talented at what he does, I also think there's something to be said for having more tight ends and not only quarterbacks in the booth, because they know the game they were very similar ones of having to understand run game, pass game, blocking game, but they're not necessarily like the stars on their face. But because of that, sometimes they're less focused on themselves and more focused on what's going on in the actual game. So I would be interested in Dan Campbell / the general tight end collective.
He'd be great, and he's got the voice that is just fantastic for it as well.
Kyle Shanahan would be great too.
Kyle would be great, except we started the conversation by Kyle saying, I'm not going to do it, except he is really good at doing it. All right, finally, one more thing before we go. Can we play the band here, please? Full disclosure, we all discussed that this is going to be a shorter show today because Jori's fighting through it, and Madison, I'm sorry. It's my fault. Again, Ben, do a quick one more thing. What do you got?
Mine is not on football, but on the men's NCAA championship. UConn facing Michigan. UConn is a fascinating team. They are now in their 7th national championship game. They have won the previous 6 twice as an underdog. They'll be an underdog again tonight. They also have won 18 of their past 19 NCAA tournament games, and more impressively, potentially covered in 18 of those 19 games. They've done something that probably will never happen again in NCAA history, which is 2 straight tournament titles, and they covered all those games. So 6-0 one year, 6-0 the next year. They have been a machine under Dan Hurley. Whether they win will be interesting on Monday night, and whether they cover will also be interesting from a betting perspective.
Will also be interesting, over or under 250 Bill Murray crowd cutaways this evening. Jori won.
I love all of them. I mean, Bill Murray, I can't get enough Bill Murray. But yes, there are a lot.
A Cubs fan? You must be a Cubs fan. No, you're not a Cubs fan. Okay.
Twins. No, not Twins. I like the Cubs, but yeah, not Cubs.
Anyway, Jori, what do you got?
Yeah, playing off my which coach should go in the broadcasting booth, I was talking to Sean Payton about him coaching the flag football game against the flag football players. And it was just fascinating that he was talking about the amount of hours he went into with the scheme, how he watched, I think it was like all 14 games of film on Hoosh, the top player from Team USA. He really was trying to win that and committed to winning it, and was teaming up with guys like Jalen Hurts and Tom Brady. And then after they ended up losing and not coming particularly close, the way he described his feeling was, he said he felt like the robbers in Home Alone who were getting pranked by Macaulay Culkin with like one thing bonking you in the head and the other one you're slipping. And I just thought that visual was fantastic. So
it was great.
The conversation continues about flag versus tackle, but I loved how much he was committed and how miserably it failed.
I talked to both Kyle Shanahan and Robert Saleh off to the side. Off to the side, meaning not on camera. I don't know however else you want to describe it, at the meeting last week in Phoenix, and the way they tell stories from that weekend. And look, and I think it's a really interesting conversation to have about, is there, with proper time and practice, a chance the NFL guys can win? I tell you, Saleh really does believe that. Just, do you put the time and practice and effort into it, or do you just go with whoosh and say, go ahead, guys, go in the gold? My one more thing, because Ben went basketball, I'm going to go baseball here. Tip of the cap to Jose Ramirez of your Cleveland Guardians, who tonight played in his 1,000, whatever it is. I can't read the screen here. He became the franchise record holder for games played, which is pretty ridiculous because this franchise goes back to 1896. It was a charter member of the American League in 1901. And Jose Ramirez will one day be in the Hall of Fame. When he first came up, if you listen to the television replay, Kenny Albert called the game on Fawkes. It was a national broadcast of his very first home run, which barely got over the wall in right field at Yankee Stadium. Yankee Stadium, fun fact, no bigger than Williamsport, where they play the Little League World Series. Kenny Albert, on the broadcast, they say that Jose Ramirez is just keeping the seat warm until Francisco Lindor, who is a first-round pick, comes up from the minor leagues. As we sit here today, in only a handful of games played beyond, or more games played than Lindor, Jose Ramirez, higher OPS, more home runs, more RBIs than Francisco Lindor, who is also on a Hall of Fame track. They will both be in Cooperstown, and that is amazing. And this was cool as well. This was Friday. Just two big Taylor Swift fans hanging out.
Look at this guy
on opening day. Trav was wearing the glasses, and I'm like, you know what? If we're taking a picture, I need to wear the glasses as well. I'm the short one, by the way.
Thank you for clarifying.
Right. And no,
it's a great picture.
And no, for the 1,000th time, for people texting me, she wasn't there. She wasn't at the game. Okay. Don't you think she would have been the picture if she was at the game? Yes. Thank you. That is all.
I'd hope so.
Yes. Layla Edwards was also part of that IG post, whose awesome gold medal winner, Cleveland Heights, Ohio, who had the gold that sent the gold medal game to overtime with a minute remaining, where the Americans eventually won one of 2 hockey golds, both the women and the men. That is it, Jori. Please feel better. Please. Please, please, please.
That's the goal.
Yeah. Good luck to your twins. Go have some hot tea, Jori. I'm Andrew. Thanks for watching and listening to another edition of Inside Coverage on Yahoo. So long, everybody.